My therapy client is angry. His wife won't let him take care of their son, and I was shocked when I found out why. As a psychologist, I often navigate the turbulent waters of troubled relationships. But when Colin's case took an unexpected twist, I found myself breaking protocol and stepping into uncharted territory. What secrets lay behind Colin's fractured family? And could I uncover the truth? I sat at my desk, quietly preparing for my next client. The name on my schedule was Colin, and from our brief phone conversation earlier, I knew he was seeking help regarding problems with his wife. As a psychologist, I had met countless couples and individuals struggling with relationship issues. It was nothing new to me, yet I always felt a sense of readiness and curiosity when meeting someone for the first time. Every story was different, and every emotion came with its own weight. I glanced around my office one last time, checking that everything was in order. The soft cushions on the couch, the box of tissues on the table, the comforting scent of lavender in the air. Just then, I heard the door handle turn. I looked up and saw a tall man standing in the doorway, shifting uneasily on his feet. "May I?" he asked hesitantly, his voice low and unsure. "Yes, of course, come in," I said warmly, offering a reassuring smile. First impressions mattered, especially with clients who already seemed guarded. Colin entered the room slowly, his eyes scanning the space before he made his way to the couch opposite me. He sat stiffly, resting his hands in his lap, but they didn't stay still for long. His fingers fidgeted, nervously twisting and tapping against each other. His expression was tight, lips pressed into a thin line. "So, what brings you here today?" I asked gently, leaning forward just a bit, trying to make the environment feel less formal, more like a conversation. Colin didn't make eye contact. "I already told you. I'm having problems with my wife," he replied, his tone clipped and defensive. I nodded, unfazed by the tension in his voice. "I know, but I'd like to hear more about it if you're comfortable." He sighed and looked away toward the bookshelf across the room. "She won't let me take care of our son," he said, his voice quieter now. "She insists he's only hers." I paused for a moment, letting his words hang in the air. "That sounds painful," I said, watching him carefully. "How does that make you feel?" "It hurts," Colin admitted. He didn't meet my eyes. "He's my son too." There was emotion behind his words. His voice wasn't loud, but the pain was clear. Often, hurt was a surface feeling, covering something deeper. In many men, especially, that deeper feeling was anger, something they often didn't know how to express. "Does it make you angry?" I asked gently, "that you can't spend time with your son?" "No," he snapped suddenly, his eyes flashing. "I said it hurts." I didn't push him further. It was common for men to resist labeling their emotions, especially anger. Instead, I shifted the direction slightly. "Have you tried talking to her about how you feel?" "Yes, she ignores me," Colin replied. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "She says she regrets marrying me." "Why do you think she says that?" I asked, hoping he might open up more. "I don't know," he said, his shoulders slumping. "She just keeps saying that our son is only hers. She told me she'll never have more children with me." His words were filled with sadness, but also confusion. "We just had a baby," he added. "It should have brought us closer." I nodded slowly. "You have a newborn then?" "Yes," Colin answered, and for the first time there was a small hint of pride in his voice. "He's just a month old." "That's a beautiful time, but it can also be challenging," I said. "Some women go through emotional changes after childbirth. Have you noticed anything that might suggest she's going through a depressive phase?" He shook his head firmly. "No, she's fine. She takes really good care of our son. She feeds him, bathes him, sings to him. She's doing well." That made things a bit more complicated. Typically, postpartum depression led to withdrawal, not just from the partner, but often from the child as well. But in this case, Colin's wife was bonding deeply with their baby, while emotionally shutting out her husband. "And when she says she doesn't want more children with you?" I asked carefully. "Did she give any other reasons?" Colin looked pained. "She says it's because I'm a bad father. But how would she know that? She doesn't even give me the chance to be one." His frustration was growing. I could see how powerless he felt, standing on the outside of something he so badly wanted to be part of, his own family. "Has anything happened recently that might have led to this shift in her behavior?" I asked, still trying to find a deeper root. He shook his head slowly. "Not really. Things were fine. But she has this friend, Toby. They spend a lot of time together." There was a pause. "At some point, I started doubting if the child is even mine," he confessed, the pain in his voice unmistakable now. "I hate thinking like that, but I couldn't help it." The mention of another man, one who was spending more time with his wife than he was, seemed to stir up deeper fears inside Colin. Insecurity, suspicion, betrayal. These were dangerous emotions when they festered without answers. "Are you against their communication?" I asked gently, hoping to better understand what Toby's presence meant in the relationship. Colin didn't answer right away. He looked down, his hands gripping each other tightly. "Of course. Who would like their wife spending time with another man?" Colin said, his frustration bubbling beneath the surface. His eyes darkened and his jaw clenched tightly. The tension in the room grew heavier as I watched his body stiffen. I spoke gently, trying to soothe his emotions. Nowadays, friendships between men and women are quite common, and if there's no hint of betrayal, I don't think it's something worth stressing over. He turned to me, narrowing his eyes. So, you think she's cheating on me too? That's not what I meant at all, I clarified, keeping my voice calm and steady. I could see how deeply insecure and confused he felt, and I knew how easily people in pain could twist words to fit their own fears. I don't know, Colin muttered, almost to himself. It all seems like cheating to me. I tried again to reassure him. Just because they communicate doesn't mean she's cheating. But it was clear he wasn't really listening. His mind was spinning with its own doubts and fears, shaping a story that suited the emotions he didn't know how to manage. This wasn't uncommon. People often create their own truths when reality becomes too hard to face. They build illusions and cling to them, even when those illusions hurt more than the truth itself. Still, I found myself wondering what truth Colin was hiding, or maybe justifying. His words didn't sit quite right with me. There was something underneath, something he hadn't yet shared. I glanced at the clock above the couch. The minute hand had nearly reached the end of our scheduled time. Colin, I said softly, I'm afraid we need to wrap up for today. He looked surprised. But I haven't covered everything. I thought one session would be enough. I gave him a small smile. Many people think that, but it's rarely true. These things take time. Would you like to schedule another session? Yes, please, he replied, and for the first time that day, there was a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. We arranged to meet again the following week. I walked him to the door, offering a gentle "take care" as he stepped out. Colin just gave a small wave in return, his thoughts clearly still tangled. As I returned to my desk, I let out a long breath. Some clients left me feeling emotionally drained, and Colin was definitely one of them. But this was part of my work. I had chosen this path because I wanted to help people, even the difficult ones, especially them. I reset the room, gathered my notes, and prepared for the next client. Though Colin's session lingered in my mind much longer than usual, something about it didn't sit right. I had a nagging feeling that he hadn't told me everything. The following week arrived quickly. Colin's session was scheduled for the afternoon, and by then I had mentally prepared myself. I was ready to gently push for more insight, to ask the questions I had avoided the first time. When I heard a knock on the door, I called out, "Come in." Colin entered the room, his movements slower than last time. He looked more tired, more distant. Without a word, he walked to the same couch and sat down. This time, he didn't fidget. He just stared ahead, avoiding my gaze. "How have you been since our last session?" I asked, watching him carefully. "Same as before," he replied with a sigh. "She hardly talks to me, but she was very kind when Toby, that friend I mentioned, came over." I nodded, remembering their previous conversation. "Yes, I remember you mentioning him. How do you feel about that?" "I want to punch him," Colin said, clenching his fists tightly. There it was again. Anger. It was starting to show more clearly now. In some cases, anger could be constructive if handled properly, but something told me Colin's wasn't the type he knew how to manage safely. "And what does your wife say about their friendship?" I asked carefully. "She says they're just friends," Colin replied. "But who calls just a friend to be at the birth?" That caught my attention. "Can you tell me more about that?" I leaned forward slightly. Curious now. Colin's voice grew more intense. "My wife went into labor. It was unexpected. But at that exact time, my mother had a minor accident. She slipped in her kitchen and was rushed to the hospital. She wasn't seriously hurt, but she was really shaken. I was already on my way to pick her up. "So you couldn't take your wife to the hospital yourself?" I asked gently. "No," he said, shaking his head. "I told her to call my sister. She lives about 25 minutes away and could have helped. But didn't your wife need to go to the hospital too? Why didn't you take your wife to the hospital first and then go together to see your mother?" I asked, genuinely puzzled. It seemed like the most logical solution in a moment of urgency. Colin shifted uncomfortably in his seat and replied, a touch of irritation in his tone. "Because my mother lives in a neighboring town, and the hospital she was taken to was there too." "I see," I said, nodding slowly. "Please continue." He sighed deeply, clearly still upset as he recalled the events. "Instead of calling my sister like I suggested, my wife called Toby. Apparently, he lives closer." His jaw was tight now, his anger starting to surface again. "And that's why he was the one at the birth?" I asked, wanting to understand how everything unfolded. "Yes," he confirmed through clenched teeth. "He's the one who took her to the hospital, stayed with her during labor, and held her hand through the whole thing." I leaned forward slightly. "How did you find out all this?" Colin's voice wavered as he explained. "My sister ended up coming to the hospital too. She recorded a short video for me since I couldn't be there. When I watched it later, I saw my wife gripping Toby's hand during a contraction. He was sitting beside her, whispering to her, comforting her, doing all the things a husband should be doing. Not him." The emotion was raw in Colin's voice. He paused, clearly trying to hold himself together. "And after bringing your mother home, why didn't you go straight to the hospital?" I asked gently, sensing there was more to this part of the story. He looked down, ashamed. "My mother said she was feeling really unwell and asked me to stay with her. She was scared, and I didn't want to leave her alone." In my mind, I quietly noted what he didn't say aloud. His priorities had been clear in that moment, and unfortunately, it wasn't his wife and their soon-to-be-born child. "And you decided to stay?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral and free of judgment. "Yes," Colin replied simply. His eyes turned red as he continued. "When I finally went to the hospital the next day to see my wife and meet our baby, she wouldn't even let me hold him. She said I didn't deserve it." I could hear the pain in his voice, the heartbreak of being rejected at such a pivotal moment in his life. "How did you respond to that?" I asked softly. Colin wiped his eyes and said, "I called her a cheater. I told her that no decent wife would let another man sit at her side while she gave birth. That was supposed to be my place." His voice cracked as tears began to fall freely now. "Do you think that was the right thing to say?" I asked, giving him space but also prompting him to reflect. "I don't know," he admitted, "but it's the truth. At least it feels like the truth." And then later, in front of her family, she humiliated me. She told everyone I didn't deserve to hold our son because I wasn't there when it mattered. She said I abandoned her. "And how did that make you feel?" I asked, allowing him to release the rest of his hurt. "I've apologized 1,000 times, Colin whispered, "but she still won't forgive me. She won't let me near our son. It's like I've already been erased from his life." He paused and stared at the floor. "I did everything for her. I tried to be a good husband. But now, after all this, she treats me like I'm nothing." Colin looked up at me, his expression desperate. "She could have called my sister. She didn't have to call Toby. Do you understand why I think she's cheating? And sometimes, I wonder if that's why she won't let me care for our son, because he's not really mine." His shoulders slumped, as if all the weight of his pain had finally settled on him. I sat back, thinking. Colin's hurt was real, and I could see how broken he felt. But it was also clear that his perception might be deeply clouded by jealousy, guilt, and frustration. His accusations stemmed not just from the facts, but from the way those facts made him feel. Replaced, excluded, and unloved. Still, something about the story didn't feel complete. His wife calling another man to her side in such a vulnerable moment. It had to mean something more. Maybe it was her way of showing Colin how much he had hurt her by not being there. Maybe it was a form of retaliation. Or maybe it was something else entirely. When our session ended, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I had never felt so unsettled after speaking to a client. For the first time in my career, I decided to break protocol. I left work, got in my car, and drove the 20 minutes to Colin's address. I didn't quite know what I was going to say, or even if I should be there. But I felt I had to do it. When I arrived, I stood in front of the house for a long moment, heart pounding. I knocked gently. After a pause, the door creaked open. A tired-looking woman appeared, holding a baby in her arms. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked at me with quiet confusion. "Excuse me," I said softly. "Are you Colin's wife?" "Yes, I'm Emily," she replied, her brow furrowing slightly. She looked tired, her arms gently rocking the baby she held, and there was a guarded look in her eyes. She didn't seem angry or rude, just confused, perhaps surprised to have a stranger at her door in the middle of the day. "Nice to meet you," I said softly. "My name is Kate. I'm Colin's psychologist, and I'd really appreciate a few minutes of your time if that's okay with you." Emily blinked at me, clearly trying to process what I had just said. Still, after a brief pause, she nodded. "All right," she said quietly, though the doubt in her expression didn't go away. She stepped aside, letting me enter the house. It was small and warm, the kind of place that told a story of a new life and endless nights without sleep. There were baby items everywhere, bottles, blankets, diapers stacked near the couch. It looked lived in and overwhelmed in the way that homes with newborns often are. Emily led me into the living room, and we both sat down on a soft couch that had a baby blanket draped over one of the cushions. She shifted the baby in her arms and waited, clearly expecting me to explain why I was there. I didn't want to dance around the reason or make her more uncomfortable than necessary. "I won't beat around the bush," I said gently. "I'd like to talk to you about Colin. He mentioned that you won't let him take care of your son." At the mention of Colin, Emily's expression hardened just a little. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she straightened her shoulders as if bracing herself. "Well," she said firmly, "I have my reasons. I don't trust him, and I can't trust him with my son." I nodded slowly, trying not to jump to conclusions. "Is it because he didn't come to the birth?" I asked, wanting to hear her perspective directly. Emily's voice trembled slightly. "Yes, I told him how important it was for me that he be there. I was terrified, alone, and I needed him. But instead of coming to the hospital, he told me to call his sister, someone who hates me, who always puts me down. I didn't want her there when I was so vulnerable, but she came anyway, and he didn't." Her words were full of pain, not just frustration. It wasn't about the absence alone. It was the emotional abandonment she had felt in a moment when she had needed him the most. I began to see her side of things more clearly. "I understand you," I said gently, "but do you think in time you might be able to forgive him? Maybe we could schedule a family therapy session. After all, Colin told me he wasn't just sitting at home doing nothing. He said he was helping his mother, who'd had an accident." At that, Emily turned sharply toward me. Her eyes were intense now. "Is that what he told you?" she asked, her voice rising. "That he was helping his mother?" I nodded slowly. She shook her head, her jaw clenched. "No, he wasn't with his mother. He was helping his ex-girlfriend move. She was relocating to another city, and he decided that was more important than being with me while I gave birth to our son. I sat back, stunned. That one sentence changed everything. So that was the missing piece, the lie, the part of the story Colin had conveniently left out. I had suspected he wasn't being entirely honest, but I hadn't expected this. This, I thought, is exactly why I came. I needed to hear Emily's side. I want to be honest with you, I said carefully. Colin also seemed really upset about your friend being there at the birth. He mentioned Toby. Emily sighed. Yes, Toby. We've been friends since 3rd grade. We've never had anything romantic between us. Ever. But I trust him. That's why I asked him to take me to the hospital. He lives closer than Colin's sister, and I needed someone who cared, someone who wouldn't make things worse. I could feel the tension in the room rising, and I tried to keep the conversation grounded. Have you tried talking to Colin about all of this? I asked softly. I did, Emily said, her voice trembling now. But he doesn't listen. He keeps saying he's sorry over and over, but it's not about that. He wants me to say I forgive him just so he can feel better. But what about me? I was in pain. I was terrified. And when he wasn't there, someone else had to be. How can I trust a man who doesn't care about me when I need him the most? And if I can't trust him to care for me, how do I know he truly cares for our son? Tears filled her eyes, and she looked down at the baby she held. I paused, letting the silence settle before gently asking, have you thought about leaving him? Emily nodded slowly, still looking down. I have, many times, but I don't have a job or any money. I'm completely financially dependent on him. And now with the baby, it feels impossible. Something inside me ached for her. She was stuck. Not because she didn't want a better life, but because she didn't have the means to build one on her own. There's something else I think you should know, I said cautiously. Did you know that while you were in labor, his sister was on FaceTime with Colin the entire time? Emily looked up at me in shock. What? She whispered. No, I had no idea. That's horrible. I didn't even notice her. I could see the shock and heartbreak wash over her again. She had already felt alone, and now it was clear others were watching her most vulnerable moment without her even realizing it. I reached out gently. Emily, if you really want to leave him, I can help you. Her eyes widened with hope. Really? Yes. You can't raise a child in this kind of environment. You and your son deserve peace, security, and support. I'll help you figure out your next steps. Half an hour later, I helped Emily gather her belongings. A suitcase with baby clothes, a diaper bag, a few essentials. She placed her sleeping baby in a carrier, and we walked out of the house together. Emily got into my car, and I carefully placed the bags in the trunk. As I pulled away from the house, I looked at her sitting beside me. She didn't say much during the drive, only a quiet thank you as she looked out the window. The car was silent, but my heart was full. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had truly made a difference. This was why I had chosen to become a psychologist. Not just to listen, not just to talk, but to act when someone needed a hand reaching out into the dark. And Emily had taken it.